Hello everybody, and welcome back to my Country Sparkles channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to freeze dry raw eggs. About 6 months ago we got new baby chicks. They were 2-3 days old, and now they are laying a plethora of eggs. We currently have 33 chickens, so I get a lot of eggs per day, at least a dozen at this point. Look at those colors. We get anywhere from blue to green to brown and white, and kind of everything in between, and it is so fun. But with this kind of overload of eggs, I'm like, what am I going to do with all these things? And I've started freeze drying them raw. Some uses for freeze dried raw eggs are you can use them in loads of baking stuff, like baking cakes, baking pies, baking anything. You can bake a breakfast casserole with it. You just add some water, whip them up, and then they reconstitute just like you've blended up some eggs. You can even make something as simple as scrambled eggs. So I'm very excited to add this to our long-term food storage. Freeze drying raw eggs is really simple. All you have to do is have your eggs. I'll crack them open. I'll put them in my blender, blend them up together, and then I'll add them to my freeze drying trays, put them in the freeze dryer, and freeze dry it. That's it. Super simple. When they're done, they're in a kind of powdery form, and I just crush it up, and then I put it in their Mylar bags. So let's get started. All I'm doing is I've got my cool little blender here. This is a Hamilton Beach blender. I don't even know if they make this kind anymore with the spout, but I love it. I really love the spout. It makes filling up the trays really easy. When you're freeze drying a liquid, if you think about it, so if I put a liquid in this tray and then I carry it around to my freeze dryer, I don't have perfect balance. So it's very hard to carry liquids in your freeze drying trays. So what I prefer to do is take it down in either my blender or a measuring cup pitcher thing, and I will put my tray inside my machine first and then fill up the tray to where I want it to be in the tray, and then I just slide it back. I don't have to walk balancing liquid in my hands. At first I definitely tried that. We are way past that stage now. But it's a little tip for you: when you're freeze drying liquids, don't try to carry your trays to your machine. Take your trays to the machine and then fill them up with your food, with the trays like partway sticking out of the freeze dryer. Now that you have that little tip, let's get to cracking some eggs. So for my freeze dryer, I figured out I fit about 2 dozen eggs per tray, and I have 4 trays, so I have 8 dozen eggs here. These are all been washed, so there's nothing on the outside from the chickens, and I've got a little shell bucket here, and all I'm gonna do is just crack them in, blend them up. Super easy. Because my eggs come from my own personal chickens, they vary in sizes extremely. I have super teeny eggs. These are all actually about medium-sized eggs that I'm using for this video, but they can go from super teeny, like this big of an egg, to pretty large eggs. And so when I figure out my 2 dozen per tray, I just figure I'll do all the sizes and then they'll even each other out. So how many eggs can fit in the tray definitely depends on how large of eggs you're blending up. There it is. That's what 2 dozen eggs looks like in my blender. Now all we're gonna do is blend them up. Ooh, I almost forgot the lid. Ha! That would've been bad. There it is, all blended, super easy. Now I'm gonna take the tray and my eggs down to my freeze drying machine to fill it up. Here we are at my freeze dryer, and I've got my blended up eggs. And all I'm going to do is fill it up. Really easy. I'm watching the level to make sure it doesn't get too full. But done this a few times, so 2 dozen eggs is just right for me. And the size of my machine. Tilt it to get all the eggs out. It's kind of like foam from blending them up, and that's okay. That will just freeze dry as well. Okay. That's it. Now I slide it in. and it's ready to be freeze-dried. Once your food is all prepped and ready to be freeze-dried, put it in your freeze dryer, and then I like to come in here. I check my little list down here, which I saw on Etsy, and I follow it. So a closed drain valve, do that first. Over here, it's really important to close this. This is in the open position. This is in the close. The open position allows water to drain out after it's done freeze drying, and the closed position locks the air in so it can pressurize, so it can pull the moisture out. The next, the door ring and then the door pad. So the door ring, I like to pull this out just a little bit so to make sure the door gets a good seal when I shut it. And then the door pad is up here. Put that in there, nice and snug, and then we shut the door. Just like that. You can see how the ring's pressing against right there. That means it's got a really good seal all the way around. And last instruction, check oil level. So I come over here, check the oil, and it is right where it needs to be. Now that my checklist is all done, I turn on my machine. Just like that. My machine is a knob-based system. It's one of the more original ones. There's knob freeze dryers and then there's touchscreen freeze dryers. So your freeze dryer might be different than mine, but that's okay. They all work the same way. And there it is. All we do is sit back and relax and wait for our food to get done. It alerts us when it's done by making that loud, annoying beeping sound. And it will just keep beeping until you come turn off the machine and take your food out. So it's a nice system, so that way you don't forget about the food in your freeze dryer when it's done. Okay, my freeze dryer is all done, so let's take it out. It'll beep here in a second again. I won't wait for it to beep, but all I do is I flip the switch to turn it off. And that's good. And then to come over here, and I have to release the air. Like that. And then I like to release it slowly instead of quickly. It's all dependent on preference. And then once the air stops traveling through there, then I can open the door. So it vacuum sucks all the air out of there. And then in order to open the door, you have to allow air to go back in. So that's what we're waiting for. Okay, as you can tell, you don't hear the air sucking in anymore, so it's done. So I just finished opening this valve because this is also where the water drains out of, and I'll show you where the water comes from. So let's open the door. We'll take this out, and there they are. Our freeze-dried raw eggs. And so the moisture is frozen onto the sides here, so this has to defrost before I can put the next batch in, but here's what they look like. Oh, nice and hard. Oh yeah. And this will just powder up, and I will store it in to some jars or Mylar bags, all depending on what I feel like at the time. Probably Mylar bags because it's so crumbly. So I'll get that all powdered up and put into Mylar bags. Okay, here are my raw eggs, and I am just going to scrape them up with my scraper and put them into Ziploc bags for now. I'll do a couple more batches before I Mylar bag them all up because I don't want to open up my oxygen absorbers and release oxygen in there too often. And so this is all I'm doing. And then I'll crush it up in the bag too as I put it in there. So look how flaky that is, and it just breaks right apart. Just like that. So that is the next step. Get my bags filled up. After taking my raw eggs out of the freeze dryer, all I did was they break up into kind of like sheets of raw eggs, and I will put them in a Ziploc and I'll crunch it up just like this in the bag, and I'll keep it in here. This is a freezer Ziploc, so it's a little bit thicker. I'll keep it in this bag for temporary storage until I have a few more batches done, and then I will put it into Mylar bags for long-term storage. And I'm gonna write on this bag raw egg, so I know it's raw, and I need to be extra careful when processing it that I don't mix it with any other foods, because I don't want raw meat transferring over into any of my vegetables. And that's it. I will just store it in my pantry until I'm ready to Mylar bag up probably about 10 batches worth. So that way, when I open up my oxygen absorbers, I only have to open them for a short amount of time, and then they will stay fresh longer. So that is how you freeze dry raw eggs. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure and this journey today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like down below and subscribe so we can see you next time. Bye.